Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. By now, everybody should be familiar with the story of Rodney Hinton Jr. His son was killed during a mysterious and still unexplained interaction with the police. We don't have all the details of it. Apparently, they don't feel it's important enough to share. And then, about the next day, Mr. Hinton Jr., after seeing the video of his son dying at the hands of the police, he was then immediately arrested afterwards, and the police are charging him with having harmed a sheriff's deputy. I've read every white media news story I could about this incident, and so far I haven't found any mention of anyone taking him to a Burger King. Just thought I'd throw that in there. When he was finally taken to court for his arraignment, the police made the thing into a three-ring circus and did so deliberately. It was also obvious that during his time in custody, he had clearly been assaulted by police. Keep in mind, this man has not been charged with resisting arrest or anything, so how did that happen? We hadn't heard anything for a few days, but there has been a development. A $25 million lawsuit has been filed, claiming that Mr. Hinton Jr. had his civil rights violated after his arrest. Well, that's pretty obvious. The lawsuit is seeking $25 million in damages. It was filed on Thursday, May the 8th, and it names multiple agencies, including the Cincinnati Police Department, the State of Ohio, the Hamilton County Justice Center, and Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey. As of this recording, Mr. Hinton Jr. still remains in custody, this for a man who has no felonies on his record, and even though this is the first time he's been charged with something of this nature, he's being treated as if he apparently was an axe murderer who had previously been convicted of killing a family of 10. Now, the complaint was filed by Mr. Hinton Jr.'s next friend, Antoinette Holloway. The lawsuit alleges that Mr. Hinton Jr. was detained by Cincinnati police without conviction or meaningful bond hearing. The lawsuit also claims Mr. Hinton Jr. appeared visibly beaten during arraignment, indicating physical abuse while in custody. The lawsuit also claims officers that filled the courtroom during his arraignment was a coordinated presence clearly intended to intimidate, suppress defense, and influence the judicial process. The lawsuit specifies that all of these abuses were violations of Mr. Hinton Jr.'s 13th and 14th Amendment rights and is seeking compensatory damages of $5 million and punitive damages of $20 million. Now, something that should be added is reports are that the white media reached out to Hinton Jr.'s attorney, Clyde Bennett, about this lawsuit. Mr. Bennett said that it's not his lawsuit, and he doesn't know who the person who filed the lawsuit is, and he doesn't support the lawsuit. Well, you know what? I support the filing of this civil rights lawsuit. When somebody has merely been arrested and charged, they're not supposed to be brutalized and beaten by the police. And on top of that, when the police allow themselves to engage in this kind of behavior, what it does is it gives people suspicions about how they've been operating. And that's actually what's at stake here, the legitimacy of law enforcement. You have the DA and the police union thugs out there who are saying that they want to do something about the crowdfunding that's been raised for Mr. Hinton Jr.'s legal defense. Now, whether it be George Zimmerman or Kyle Rittenhouse or whomever, you have never seen any of these DAs or prosecutors or police unions saying, we need to do something about this person who harmed some black person over here. They never say, oh, how can you be crowdfunding for this person? They're obviously guilty. They don't do that. And in the case of Mr. Hinton Jr., they're saying, well, we got to find a way to stop his crowdfunding. Now, isn't that something that a DA is supposed to be doing, to be trying to find a way to make sure that a defendant is not able to raise sufficient funds so that they can mount a viable defense? When have you ever heard of that happening? This is not justice. What this is they're trying to do some sort of legal railroading. They should be leaving Mr. Hinton Jr.'s fundraising alone. They should not be trying to find some way to intimidate these websites because they never do it for any other reason. You would never have them saying, well, if someone's been accused of something, you can't crowdfund. That's what they're saying. They're saying, well, allegations like this, you shouldn't be able to crowdfund. Well, in that case, then shouldn't that go for everybody? But of course not. This is not about justice, and it's not about propriety. It's about making sure that you get a guaranteed result where a black defendant is concerned. Now, I think that more than a few people can appreciate that this is a precedent-setting case. There's never really been a defendant quite like this one who's been accused of what Mr. Hinton Jr.'s been accused of. They're claiming that he committed a revenge killing for the death of his son at the hands of the police. And of course, since the defendant is black, the white media is not putting on any experts who are telling us how difficult it is to get a conviction. You know, like every single case where a black person has been killed, the first thing the white media does is to bring on some pointy-headed expert who immediately says, well, you can't really tell how this is going to go, and it may seem cut and dried, but the law is rather complex and intricate, you know, and there's all of these defenses that this person has for killing this black person. There's all these legal defenses. We're not hearing that in this case. Nobody's saying anything about fearing for their life. Nobody's saying anything about split seconds to react. And even though this man had seen video of his child being killed only minutes before he was arrested for allegedly committing a crime, they're not bringing on a raft of experts to say, let's talk about this man's mental health and what kind of mental health defenses can he have. We've seen case after case after case where black people get gunned down in the street with their hands up, and the first thing that we have is the white media immediately repeating whatever defense counsel's talking points are, saying, well, the police officer in question, they were tunnel visioning at that point. They couldn't see or hear anything because they were just so keyed up. They were just so anxious at that moment. Their other senses just went dead. That and a raft of other pseudoscience, and the white media never questions it, never even examines it. Here you have an actual law-abiding citizen, no felonies on his record. Clearly, he just saw his child being killed only mere minutes before he was arrested for this alleged offense. And absolutely nobody in the white media is saying, let's bring on our mental health experts. Let's bring on some psychologists and psychiatrists who can explain to our audiences how this kind of thing works, how somebody goes from being a law-abiding citizen one moment to being accused of harming a police officer the next. How does that happen? What was going through this man's mind? What kind of mental health processes were going on here? We don't get that at all. See, whenever there's some mass murder that's committed by a member of the dominant society, they gun down 60 people at a country music concert or a bunch of kids in a classroom, the very first thing that we hear is, well, clearly there was something wrong with this person. Obviously. Oh, sure, they didn't have anything traumatic happen to them in the minutes before they went on their slaughter spree, but just the fact that they did this and they're not black, well, obviously there's some sort of mental health issue at stake, and we need to make sure that we understand this person's a human being, and don't forget that. But with Mr. Hinton Jr., he's not accused of gunning down a bunch of kids in a classroom. And what happened with his case, they're basically saying that this guy immediately went into a crime of passion. And that being the case, if you got a diminished capacity defense, he could very well be on extremely solid ground. And yet, the white media is not saying, let's talk about this guy the same way that we talk about mass murderers. They're giving this man less thought and less consideration than they give to somebody who guns down 60 people at a country music concert. Now, what does that tell you? The white media is not actually concerned about the law. They're not actually concerned with explaining to the public possible legal defenses. As far as they're concerned, they need to tell the public this crazy nigger is guilty as hell and he has to go to prison, evidence be damned. The same white media that spent year after year lying through their teeth and saying, well, it's just impossible to predict what a jury could do. I mean, just the intricacies of the law, the intricacies of the legal process, we just couldn't say. Suddenly now the law is very simple. Simple as black and white. And none of them is going to bring up this civil rights lawsuit on his behalf. None of them are going to ask, was this man assaulted by police while he was in custody? No, as far as they're concerned, well, let's just go ahead and blow right past that. But this strikes at the very heart of this case. The entire case against Mr. Hinton Jr. is that he illegally took the law into his own hands in a moment of fury and he committed some violent offense. And yet when you look what happened to him in custody, isn't that the exact same thing that these deputies and these police did to him? And if the white media's justification for that is going to be, well, sometimes two wrongs do make a right, well, keep in mind that plays precisely to Mr. Hinton Jr.'s legal defense. But you know, there is somebody who I think that this case is similar to, Luigi Mangione. Very similar, because Mangione is also accused of killing a man he didn't know, a man who hadn't personally done him any harm, but apparently because of whatever organization that this man was a part of, that's the allegation against Mangione, that was the reason that he killed this guy, because of the organization that he was part of. And while nobody in the white media is celebrating Mangione, there's a hell of a lot of them who are saying, well, we do need to at least give some lip service to explaining the obvious discontent by the masses because it can't be ignored, it can't be denied. You got a lot of people in the public and a number of people even in the white media who are trying to make some sort of folk hero out of Luigi Mangione, a man who they know virtually nothing about. You can say a lot of things about Luigi Mangione, but the one thing nobody can say is that he was overcome by some sort of moment of anger or a crime of passion, or that he suffered from temporary insanity or anything else. That's what I hope to get across with this morning's briefing. Double standards across the board. That's how we got here. And the only way back is to stop making excuses for and defending some acts of violence while selectively defending others. If one is wrong, then they're all wrong. Using propaganda to justify a two-faced legal system and to condition the public to automatically react negatively to defendants based solely on skin color, that's not justice. We have yet to hear Mr. Hinton Jr.'s side of the story, and we should. The white media loves to lecture us that we can't know what's in a person's mind, especially if it's somebody who killed a black person. That's the first thing they say, well, you can't say what's in their mind. Well, that goes infinitely for Mr. Hinton Jr. It's impossible to say exactly what was going through his mind that morning, because one thing's for sure, he was not in his right mind that morning. How could anyone be after watching their child be gunned down? Mr. Hinton Jr. is not some common criminal. He's not a George Zimmerman or a Kyle Rittenhouse beating up schoolgirls after class. Mr. Hinton Jr. is a hard-working family man, a law-abiding citizen. What he should be getting is our understanding, just like the white media does for every other killer out there as long as they're not a black defendant. What's called for here is understanding, not trying to put this man under just because. And under a so-called justice system that claims that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, an innocent man should certainly not be brutalized by the thugs in blue simply because he's in handcuffs and they think to themselves that he did something to them. Because if at trial Mr. Hinton Jr. is indeed convicted of causing this deputy's death, whatever occurred, whatever was going through his mind was unquestionably not the result of careful planning on his part, nor was it some sort of reckless indifference on his part. This man was clearly not in his right mind. And that's something that neither his son's killers nor Luigi Mangione can say. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Jason Frazier, Jonathan Maynor, Johnny Martin, Chris Pruitt, and Bobby Johnson. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.